So Yongnuo sent me this flash out for free in exchange for a review, and who doesn't like free stuff, right? So I said, why not? I can give you an honest review about this flash. And really, Yongnuo as a brand has developed, I think, quite a reputation among the professional community for making very affordable, reliable flashes of decent quality. If you look at any of the reviews online, they're generally very good for this brand. So I had no problem, looking at this flash and doing a review, but um, I used to actually shoot with Yongnuo all the time back when I had my Nikon full frame system. But since switching to Micro Four Thirds, I've sold a lot of that stuff off, including my Yongnuo flashes. The only flash I kept was my Nikon SB800. And when I'm using this flash, I can only use this in full manual with my Micro Four Thirds gear. There's no TTL, there's no high-speed sync, none of that. But I think most professionals, really that's not an issue. There's very limited case use for high-speed sync flash. And even for TTL, I think most professionals prefer to shoot in manual because you want full creative control over your images. I think Joe Edelman is a great example of that. He doesn't use high-speed sync or TTL. He just goes full manual all the time, and he's very, very, good portrait photographer. And that's not to say that TTL and high-speed sync don't have a place, but for the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, I haven't been using TTL or high-speed sync at all in my photography, and I do real estate work professionally, and I just really don't need it. And that brings me to this flash, because this flash is a full manual flash. And there's no TTL, there's no high-speed sync, but it does have some other unique features that I think really set this apart at this price point. I think this is around $80, give or take. I've seen it for higher and a little bit less, but really the Li version, because they have a lot of different YN560s, but the Li version, basically this is a single pin flash, meaning it's full manual. There's, it's going to fire with any trigger, but it uses the Li, I guess stands for lithium ion. It uses lithium ion batteries, which give you higher voltage and higher capacity than standard AA batteries. And that results in, much faster recycle times. I mean, I can recycle in less than 2 seconds from full power over and over again with this flash. And the other nice thing about being lithium ion is they didn't use like a proprietary battery. These are generic 18650 batteries that you can get anywhere for this flash. So you're not locked into a proprietary set. So 2-3 years from now, if you want to get a replacement battery, you can just go out and buy these, all day long. Unlike a lot of proprietary batteries, you have to go, full generic if you can even find them. And generally they're not as good as the originals. And that's the other thing, is they include these 2 batteries plus the charger for it, so that you can recharge these anywhere you go. It's a little USB charger. The other thing this flash has is a built-in transmitter receiver radio trigger. So if you have other flashes of same, or you have compatible radio triggers with this that are very cheap, like I think I've seen them for like $38 or something for radio triggers for this flash. But you can use this flash with another flash that's compatible with it, generally the same exact one, and this can fire that flash via radio signal. And that's really handy, because sometimes you forget to bring your trigger with you. Trust me, I've done that many times when I've gone out in the shoot. But if you have a couple of these, you can use one as a transmitter and set up the other one as a receiver, and then you have a 2-flash system all controlled by radio trigger. So that's a really nice feature to have, especially at this price point. And the other thing, the thing that impressed me the most, because these are features you're starting to find on a lot of flashes, the radio triggers built in, and some of the other things I'm going to talk about. But what really impressed me about this was the optical trigger. Now every flash just about has an optical trigger, but this one actually works outdoors as well as my Nikon SB800, because I've bought a lot of flashes over time, and whenever I bought the generic brands, you know, the optical triggers never fired outdoors. That's because when the ambient light gets too bright, okay, it either saturates the trigger or the trigger is not sensitive enough to tell the difference between a flash firing and the ambient light around it. So sometimes it'll fire randomly, sometimes it won't fire at all, but it's not reliable and you can't rely on an optical trigger. But this trigger I have found in bright daylight, I've been able to rely on this as much as my Nikon SB800. Now of course, you know, you always want to try to use a radio trigger when possible because that's the most reliable. But this optical trigger is the best I've ever seen on a you know, entry-level flash or off-brand name flash, like not Nikon, not Canon, etc. Even better than the Yongnuo systems I used to have in the past. This one is much, much improved. So I can't emphasize enough how handy that is. You know, if you forget to get a radio trigger or you decide not to buy a radio trigger at all, you can get by with just this, and I'll demonstrate that for you. A couple other really nice features are just on the unit itself. It has a nice little toggle on-off switch, but in the middle there's a lock, so that once you have all the settings set up, you can switch this about halfway over and it'll lock all the settings so that when you're walking around with this flash, it's not going to, you're not going to bump the buttons or change any settings inadvertently and then get the wrong exposure. So that I really like. And the build quality overall is very good. You know, I don't see any problems with it. It feels pretty solid. It doesn't feel cheap or chintzy. It's really good. And then as far as the information layout, very good, and the buttons and everything are very good. But what I really like about this, I didn't have to look at the manual at all. Every button on here has a very specific purpose, and it's very easy to go from one setting to the next or change one setting to another. You know, once you're familiar with using manual flash, all these settings, you'll really appreciate the layout of these buttons and how easy it is to use. And then you have your simple jog dial and OK button in the middle, again making everything very simple. Okay, and then one or two other minor things. This has the flip lock shoe attachment. I prefer the twist on type because I found that the flip locks, even after you have them on your flash, they're a little bit jiggly still. It's not quite as snug. Now they've included a little like rubber washer that you can put on that'll make it nice and snug, but it makes kind of for too tight of a fit, I think. It's I don't like it. It's kind of a workaround in my opinion. I'd rather have the twist lock, but I know some people just prefer just the convenience of just putting it on and snapping it like that and locking it and it's attached. But I don't like the jiggly stuff, you know, myself. And then one other minor thing is over here underneath this rubber flap there's a PC sync cord and a USB for upgrading any kind of firmware. You know, but I don't think in the last forever I've ever updated the firmware on a flash. But maybe there's a reason to now that these have all these features in them, the transmitter receiver in particular. Now in terms of power output, this is about, actually I think, a third of a stop brighter than this one, and I tested it by taking a few test shots and seeing when the highlights blow out, and they blew out a lot faster when I was using this flash than this one, right around about a third of a stop higher. So that makes this flash brighter and puts it on par with any flash out there that would mount on top of your camera. Now, I took this flash with me on one of my real estate jobs yesterday in place of my Nikon SB800, and really it performed just as well, if not a little better, because the recycle times are very fast, like 2 seconds from full power. And I took maybe 120 pictures or so, and 30 or 40 of those were with flash basically at full power. And it really, I had no problems at all. The recycle times are very, very fast. And I'll probably be taking this with me from now on instead of this. So if you've been thinking about getting a Yongnuo flash, I really have no problems recommending this to anyone because the optical trigger on this is awesome. It's very reliable even outdoors. You know, the generic batteries, so you can replace them anytime, but you still get that high power lithium output and fast recycle times.